All right, I have a short sermon for us this morning. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 7. We're going to look at a parable that Jesus taught. The parable is called The Wise and Foolish Builders. And of course, we all want to be on the wise side, right? We don't want to be on the foolish side. I love the way Jesus teaches. It's light, dark, wise, foolish. He gives us a choice, and he makes it super clear the obvious choice for us, right? And that way, it's not we're not walking in the darkness, in the clouds, trying to figure out why we're here and what we should be doing. Jesus' teachings are very clear. And so let's start off here in verse 24. Therefore, okay, let's stop there. Whenever there's a therefore, you got to know what he said before that, right? And so it actually starts in chapter 5. So here in verse 1 of chapter 5, he brings up a crowd up onto a mountain, and he preaches the greatest sermon ever recorded in history, the Sermon on the Mount. And so I highly recommend that on your time, you go back and you study it, and you see how it can be applied into your life, and really meditate on Jesus' words. But I'm just going to go through and give you some of the highlights. So in chapter 5, you got the Beatitudes, which means supreme happiness. And it's great that Jesus starts with supreme happiness, because that's what we want, right? And most people are seeking happiness, either in relationships, or in a new car, or in a great job, or the money they have in their bank account. And Jesus gives us true happiness through his words. And if you read it, you'll see it's something totally different. He also teaches to let your light shine. You guys are definitely shining this morning in your singing. He also says in chapter 5, if someone slaps you on your right cheek, turn to the left. That's a hard one, right? Oh man, someone just cuts you off, you get upset.
Oh, bro, talk about it.
He says to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Wow, that's a hard teaching. In chapter 6, he teaches how we should give, and how we should pray, and how we should fast, and how we should deal with money. And he ends with, do not worry. And isn't society filled with people that worry?
Yeah.
It's like the drug dream for the drug companies. People are worried, so they come up with pills that they can sell to help us with worrying. And Jesus teaches us how we don't have to worry. It's a great, great lesson. He says, even you can't add even one single hour to your life by worrying. So why are you worrying? He says God's going to take care of you if you seek him first. In chapter 7, I love chapter 7. It starts off with not judging others. We love that, right? Don't judge me. Who are you to judge me? And so people talk about that. Well, the Bible says do not judge. But actually what he says, before you judge, in other words, before you help the other person, make sure you take the plank out of your own eye before you help your brother or sister with the little speck in their eye. And so you don't want to be a hypocrite. You want to make sure that you're following God wholeheartedly before you try to help someone else. He talks about the narrow road of salvation, and he warns us of the wolf in sheep's clothing to make sure that you're not duped by false religion. And then he ends in verse 24. Therefore, so now we know, right? Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. So he goes into a parable about building a house. And you know, when you're growing up, I don't know about you, but I remember me going to school, walking to school, I passed by these homes, and after a while I'm like, I'm going to get a house just like that. I remember thinking, when I grow up, I'm going to come back, I'm going to buy that house. It just looked awesome. And then you see on TV, they actually make TV shows about awesome homes.
Yep.
Yeah, MTV Cribs, right? And so you go into these homes, the camera goes into the homes, and they got pools in the living room. And garages full of expensive cars. And just the entrance is bigger than most New York apartments. Right? It's just huge. And you go, wow, I want a house like that. You start dreaming. And then you get older and you start thinking, where would I build my perfect house? Maybe up on a hill overlooking the ocean, or by a lake. And you start dreaming about your house, right? And so the title of my lesson is Building the House of Your Dreams. Now Jesus is not talking about a literal house. He's talking about your life. And so building the life of your dreams.
Come on.
And so when you build a house, you want to make sure you have a foundation. You don't want it to tip over. And so the perfect foundation is found in Matthew chapter 5.
Come on, bro.
Building our life, building the church, needs to be about love.
Come on.
Individually, how you love God and how you love people, and collectively, together as we come together. Do we love God? Do we love people? And is it obvious to those who are not here? Well, that's what that group does. That group, they love God. They love people. And is it obvious? Here, Jesus teaches about love in verse 43. Read with me here. It says, "You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." And so love is the foundation of a life that you can be proud of. The life of your dreams. If you have a foundation of love. If it's anything else, it's going to crash and burn. Love is what is real, is what sustains, it is what describes God and Jesus. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 20, it talks about how Jesus is the cornerstone of God's temple as we build together and we rise up to be a holy temple for God. And the cornerstone is what they would do, what they would use back then to build a house. They would take rocks and they would cut them into squares, and the one that was the most perfect would be in the corner. And then from there they could build left and right and up and have a nice building. And so Jesus is our example. And Jesus, all he did was love. And the way that he loved, he did not discriminate. He loved the children. Even though his own followers were like, get rid of the children, they're bothering us. And sometimes we can feel like that. I've got kids. And sometimes, kids can get on your nerves. But it didn't get on Jesus' nerves. He said, no, bring him to me. This is what the kingdom is all about. And I go, oh, I can't be that way. I gotta love like Jesus. I was going through the high school where we're gonna do this event, and I brought a friend along, and he's like, hey, I want to bring Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard would be great to have and come and participate. And my heart was like, oh, Dwight Howard. And I go, man, why do I behave that way? Why would I react differently with Dwight Howard than these kids that are here playing basketball at this school? I should love them equally. I shouldn't react that way, but we do. If you're honest about it, right? You go, oh, someone just came in that's famous. Take a picture, let's get a selfie. Jesus didn't do that. He touched everyone. Male, female, you're a leper, doesn't matter. I'm going to love you. You're the king, doesn't matter. I'm going to love you and tell you the truth. Right? He wasn't afraid of those who were rich. He said, no, you need to repent, you need to change, just like everyone else. And so that's perfect love. And that's what we need to strive for. I was reading this article that just came out, and it's about Bill Gates. I'm going to read it to you. And basically, the story is that Bill Gates, one of the richest men on the planet, has a mentor. And I'll just read it to you. Sure, Bill Gates is one of the wealthiest people alive. That doesn't mean he knows everything, though. Everyone has something left to learn, and for Bill Gates, it appears that that lesson came from no other than Warren Buffett. And so Warren Buffett is a little older and a little richer, just so if you didn't know. On Bill Gates' blog, he shared what he believes is the best way of measuring success in life. And so at the end of every year, he writes down what he learned the year before. So he writes, one thing that occurs to me is that the questions I'm asking myself at age 63 are very different from the ones I would have asked when I was in my 20s. Back then, an end-of-year assessment would amount to just one question. Is Microsoft software making the personal computing dream come true? Today, of course, I still assess the quality of my work, but I also ask myself 3 other questions about my life. Actually 4. But 3 he came up with, and then the 4th one, Warren Buffett taught him. So the first one was, did I devote enough time to my family? Did I learn enough new things? So at age 63, he's evaluating what he learned the previous year. That's pretty awesome. Number 3, did I develop new friendships and deepen my old ones? Those are good questions to evaluate in your life. He goes on. These would have been laughable to me when I was 25, but as I get older, they are much more meaningful. He continues, my wife has helped me broaden my thinking on this point, so has Warren Buffett, who says his measure of success comes down to one thing. Do the people you care about love you back? I think that is about as good a metric as you will find.
Wow, come on, bro.
And so you see, he has all the money in the world, but what really matters is love. And it took another man to teach him that. Someone a little older, someone a little wiser. And for us, we got to understand this is what Jesus is teaching. And we need to figure out how to do that. Look over in Matthew chapter 22.
Come on. Come on, bro. Let's go.
In verse 36, Matthew 22, verse 36, it says, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. And so Jesus lays down the foundation for us. The foundation of building the life of your dreams has got to start with love. Everything else is built on love. The challenge really for my first point is you got to learn to love God and love people. Learn to love God and love people. There's a new friend of mine. He just moved down from Canada a few months ago to be the evangelist in Queens. Is that a borough, Queens?
Yeah, it's a borough.
Queens. And so I have my oldest son lives on that side of the river, and my new friend Ghislaine, his name is Ghislaine, he came up to me last week, and he said, what's going on with you and your son, Kyle? I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, well, I can tell there's something off there in your relationship. And so we sat down, we started talking, and when you have something in the back of your mind, it's not really up here, you're not really thinking about it a lot. Well, he was able to reach back into my skull and bring out those feelings. And I realized that I had pulled my heart away from Kyle. And I talked to him last night. I asked if I could share this, and he said it was okay. And so Ghislaine, I shared with Ghislaine how I was feeling hurt, and but I didn't want to put that on my son. Like, how can you put that your dad is hurt on your son? I just felt like it wasn't appropriate. I needed to just man up, and move on. But what happened was, to protect my heart, I pulled away from him. And says, no, you gotta go talk to him. And so last week, I set up a time and I picked him up. We went and ate, and then we went and watched Jordan's basketball game. And then we went to the house and hung out with Bella. We just hung out the whole day, 8 hours. And I was too chicken to say anything. And as I was driving back to Queens to drop him off, I pulled over and I said, I gotta share some stuff. And it was really hard.
Come on, bro.
Come on, Dave.
Come on, bro.
It was good, because he had some stuff, and I had some stuff. And we were able to get that stuff out. And we've been talking every day since. And it's great, because I feel like I'm learning. I'm learning how I need to love better.
Come on, bro.
But it took just like
Yep.
to get in there. And just like it took Warren Buffett for Bill Gates
Yep.
to learn that, it takes people to get into your life. And so practically speaking, for my first challenge, learn to love God and learn to love people. Practically speaking, you need to get someone in your life.
Amen.
Someone that can help you.
Yep.
Ask them, how can I love God better? Teach me. How can I love people better? Because that's the foundation of having the life of your dream. Amen?
Amen.
All right, let's go back to Matthew, chapter 7.
Come on, bro.
Unless you think you're already perfect in love, then you need to come teach me. I guess it starts with humility, right?
Yep.
Verse 24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. And so, whether you're the wise or you're foolish, Jesus says the storms are going to come.
Yep.
The storms of life are going to come. It's just whether or not it's going to crash or it's going to withstand. And so my second point is build to last.
Come on.
You got to build your life to last for eternity. I was thinking about structures as I was writing this stuff down.
Come on, engineer.
Yeah, engineering. And so my wife and I, we built a few businesses from the ground up back in California. And it's amazing what you have to go through. Because there's a lot of earthquakes in California. And so you have to start with an architect, and you do the design with you get a piece of paper and you just draw, this is what I'm thinking. Little squares of your business. And then they go and do their architect thing, and they bring it back, and it looks really cool. And then you have to go to the city, and they have to approve the plans, and then they want engineers to go and check out the plans, and so that's thousands and thousands of dollars. And then they come and they inspect, there's electrical engineers, and there's structural engineers, and there's all like 3 or 4 different kinds of engineers that have to come and make sure that it's safe. So that when the earthquake comes, it stays up. When the storms come, it stays up. Now, imagine if we did that with our own life. We had spiritual engineers come inspect our life. That's what we need, right? We need people to come into our life and to help us out, make sure that we are staying strong and that we're going to be able to have a life that's built to last. Look at Matthew chapter 6.
Come on, bro.
Think about the different storms that come in life. The things that we count on that let us down. Relationships that end in divorce. Your job, you think you're going to make so much money and then you don't, so then you get into debt, right? Because you have this emotional need to keep up with the Joneses or whatever. We've all been there. Made emotional purchases and then you're like, oh man, what did I do? Illnesses, death in the family, broken trust, all these things cause our life to crash if it's not built on the rock.
Amen.
In Matthew chapter 6,
Come on, brother.
verse 24, it says, actually, verse 19. It says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And so, where we put our heart is where our treasure is.
Yeah.
And so our heart can be in relationships,
Yeah.
in our careers, in our bank account, and where your heart is, that's where you put your trust, what you trust in. And these things can let you down, and can break you, can cause anxiety and depression and suffering. And that's really what you see all around us, people that struggle with that, because their trust, their faith is in something other than God.
Amen.
In verse 24, Jesus says, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." That's pretty direct right there. Now, in the Greek, that word money is mammon, M-A-M-M-O-N. And that was originated by the Chaldeans 2,000 years before Jesus said it. And it means things that you put your trust in other than God.
Amen.
And over time, it became stuff, your stuff. But really, it's anything that you put your trust in. And so these things can let you down, and you can crash and burn. I remember there was a time when my wife and I we met in 1993 in the church, and it was amazing. And we dated, and it was just amazing. It was just an amazing time of my life, getting to know Jill, and then finally getting to be married. And during that time, I had mentors in my life, and they taught me how to go from really not knowing what to do with my life to teaching me discipline. And pretty soon, I started building a career and making money, and church wasn't that important to me anymore. And so now I started putting my trust really in myself. And even though we made the most money we ever did during that time, our relationship was bad, and we were talking about divorce. And our fights, let's just say what it was, our fights were usually about money, even though we had an abundance. And I remember the day or two after we talked about divorce, I went and I prayed for the first time in a long time. And God is faithful.
Right.
When you sincerely ask for help from God, the Bible says He will open the door.
Yeah.
And so He brought Christians back into my life, and we started getting help through the scriptures in our marriage, in our personal walk with God. And I remember, even though you're with God, you have to deal with the sins of the past,
Yeah.
right? All that stuff doesn't just go away because now you're with God.
Right.
And so all that stuff started to catch up. All the greed, all the bad investments started to catch up. And then, boom, we were going to lose our house. We were going to lose one of the businesses. And, but we were strong in the Lord. And I remember sitting on the couch with my wife, and she looked at me totally at peace. I was so nervous giving her the news, and she just looked at me, just peaceful. And she said, when we first got married, we lived down the street in a small old apartment, but we were so happy. And so if that's where we're at, that's where we're at. And I go, wow.
Come on,
God, love, peace, all that stuff you can trust in when it's God-centered.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where you're at financially when you have God. And so when we put our trust in money, it destroyed us.
Yeah.
When we put our trust in God, no matter what situation was there, we were standing on a rock, and it didn't destroy us. And God was faithful. He helped us get through that situation. I think it was really a test. Do you really trust me more than this? I think that's what God was saying. And we passed the test. And I think for yourself, that's what you gotta do. You gotta go, okay, what do I need to do to have a life that's gonna be built to last? Well, he says it right there in verse 24. He says, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like the wise man. And so that's my second challenge. If you want a life that's built to last, you got to put his words into practice.
Right.
You got to start doing it.
Yeah.
Look at the scriptures. Don't just read it. Don't just believe it, but start doing it. And maybe you're like me. When I first started reading the Bible, I didn't know what to do. And so I got with someone who invited me to church, and I said, what are you doing? And he goes, well, we're about to watch the Super Bowl. I said, can I come over? And I went over there, and I just hung out with him. And I said, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, I want to learn. I want to know what you're doing. Because I saw his life change. I knew him when I was a teenager, and he was like me. We would go out smoking and drinking and going to the strip clubs. And then when I ran back into him, he was happy in his marriage. He wasn't smoking and drinking and cursing. He was really happy. And I thought, man, if this guy can change, I can change. But I want to know how he did it. How did you do it? And guess what he said? Let's just look at the Bible. And we went through some study series, and I started doing what it said, and it totally, radically changed my life. It wasn't him, it was the Bible. He just pointed me in the right direction. And so, my challenge is, you got to put his words into practice. And I know what you might be thinking. I don't have time to schedule daily times to meet with someone. You don't know my schedule, Dave. I got this going on, I got that going on. How am I supposed to make more time in my schedule for this? Well, I just want to read you a quote from Abraham Lincoln. He says, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. And of course, he's not talking about the tree. He's talking about his life. What's more important than sharpening your life? What you eat, your exercise regimen, your spiritual, mental sharpness. All that is so much more valuable than anything else you can do. And if you do that, then together we can build the life of our dreams. And to God be all the glory.